Good morning, students. Today we shall discuss a new chapter from your civics book, chapter number 4, Electoral Politics. Let's start. The chapter starts with the very first question: why do we need elections? Before we answer this question, let me explain what is election. See, election is basically a mechanism or a system by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. This mechanism is called election. Now, it is important. The reason for it is very important because we can choose the candidate who will make laws for them. After they win the maximum number of votes, the candidate goes to the legislative body, and there they debate, discuss the issues of their respective constituencies, and the government, the political party members who are there in the ruling party, who are there in the ruling party, they will make laws for us. We can choose who will form the government and take major decisions. Yes, it is important. The political party which gets the maximum number of votes or maximum number of seats will form the government and take decisions. And in the absence of elections, it won't be possible. We won't be able to choose the political party or the political parties which will claim to form the government. The next is they can choose the party whose policies will guide the government. Yes, every political party has its own set of agenda, has its own set of ideology. So the political party which wins the majority of votes and gets the mandate of people, they will form the government and their policies will guide the government and thus lawmaking. So we won't be able to get the government for us, which will make the laws for us, which will make policies for us, right? In case elections are not conducted. Now, another important reason is in the world of representative democracy, where wherever we have democracy today in the world, we have gone for representative democracy. So the very concept of representative democracy will be non-existent if elections are not conducted. If elections don't happen, then how come people themselves will go to the legislature bodies and sit there and will debate, discuss these issues relating to the different constituencies and make laws? So without elections, all these things will not be possible. Next, we talk about the conditions that are important to make election democratic. Now, first, everyone should be able to choose. This means that everyone should have one vote and every vote should have equal value. Okay, irrespective of caste, creed, community, everyone should have the right to vote, and every person should have one vote and equal value. Equal value means the vote of an educated person should be equal to that of an uneducated person, right? There is no difference in that. Now, second is there should be something to choose from. Parties and candidates should be free to contest elections and should offer some real choice to the voters, and they should also look different from each other, right? So people should have some meaningful choice. And third is the choice should be offered at regular intervals. Elections must be held regularly after every few years. And fourth one is the candidate who is preferred by majority of people should get elected, right? And next one is the fourth point. Let me explain again. The person who is preferred by majority of people should be the natural choice and should be the natural result in the election outcomes also. Fifth is elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner where people can choose as they really wish. There should be a separate election commission body. There should be a transparent system through which the procedure of election should be conducted. Okay. Now, merits of electoral competition. Whenever the political parties or leaders go to the elections, now there are certain merits that we need to talk about. This system works better in the long run. In an ideal world, all political leaders know what is good for the people and are motivated only by the desire to serve them. Political leaders, like all other professionals, are motivated by a desire to advance their political careers. They want to remain in power or get power and positions for themselves. They may wish to serve the people as well, but it is risky to depend entirely on their sense of duty. Besides, even when they wish to serve the people, they may not know what is required to do so, or their ideas may not match what the people really want. Okay? So one way is to try and improve the knowledge and the character of political leaders, right? The other and more realistic way is to set up a system where political leaders are rewarded for serving the people and punished for not doing so. Who decides this reward or punishment? The simple answer is the people. This is what the electoral competition does. And the regular electoral competition provides incentives to political parties and leaders. They know that if they raise issues that people want to be raised, their popularity and chances of victory will increase in the next election. If they work for the people, they know that yes, if they continue to work for the people, people will vote them back to power again. There will be pro incumbency instead of anti-incumbency, where the situation of anti-incumbency will be there, where people feel that the particular candidate who is contesting election has not worked well in his last tenure. So why people would vote that person? And if the people feel that yes, this person has really worked for the constituency and for the common people, for the poor people, obviously then people will vote that person back to power. Okay. And next is political parties will be forced to serve the people. Yes, it is true. If you want to remain in the long run, if you want to be a horse of the long race, then of course you have to be continuing your work of serving the people, right? If a political party is motivated only by the desire to be in power, even then also it will be forced to serve the people. You can see during the election campaign, when the leaders go to ask for votes or appeal for votes, the people are more powerful or the voters are more powerful. Whereas after the elections are over or during the time of election, when leaders make lot of promises at the time of election campaign, but after the elections results are out, then very little of whatever promises have been made to the people actually reaches to the voters. Okay, very little of whatever good world has been promised to them, a little of, or rarely very little of that, even we the voter, as a voter, we get a very little of what has been promised. Okay. Demerits of electoral competition. It creates a sense of disunity and factionalism in every locality. We see that people are divided along political parties. A group of people might support one party, the other group of people might support another political party. Sometimes there could be some conflicts also, which could later on take the form of violence as well, right, among different political party workers or people, those who are supporting different political parties. So different political parties and leaders often level allegations against one another. This is very much these days we've been hearing, we can see on the television debates also, and at different platforms, political parties and leaders, they often level allegations against one another. Parties and candidates are often they often use dirty tricks to win elections. Dirty tricks like booth capturing, booth rigging. They might allure the voters to vote for them. They might threaten the voters to vote for them. Right? Sometimes they use money and muscle power to capture the votes. Right? They with their uh, team of ruffians, they might indirectly be involved, and they might get the booths captured and thus get maximum number of votes in their kitty. Pressure to win electoral fight does not allow sensible long-term policies to be formulated. Yes, very true, because the government or the political parties often, we've seen, aim at winning election. That is fine, but at the same time, if the results of some policies are to come at a much later date, or if its benefits to reach people at a much later date, or something which is very good for the nation in the long run, sometimes we see are being compromised, and political parties or the government in power, or the political parties in power, or the government, they resort to short-term policies or short-term goals which result in immediate benefits to people, and thus people, those who are unaware, illiterate, they might also get attracted to the policies and programs and thus would get attracted to voting that party which gives them some immediate benefits. Okay, thus we can see in electoral competition very often long term policies, or the policies which are good for the nation or which are good in the long run, are often compromised with. Some people do not like the idea of being dragged into unhealthy competition. There is a perception among the people that politics is all about bad game, so they may not like to be dragged into this kind of game or this kind of unhealthy competition. Clear? Now let us talk about the mechanism of Indian election. First, it starts with the electoral constituencies. The whole country is divided into suitable number of constituencies, keeping in mind the population densities, right? So depending on the population density, the constituencies are demarcated, and since we in our country have 543 Lok Sabha seats, so we have to divide the country into 543 Lok Sabha constituencies, and from each constituency one representative is elected. Now we have a system of reserved constituencies. Our constitution makers, they thought that we need to give voice, or we need to stand in solidarity with the weaker sections as well. So we need to allow the weaker sections people voice to be heard. So for that reason only the system of reservation has been implemented. And SCs, STs are given reservation, and talks are going on about giving reservation for women. Efforts are being made for long. There has been the proposal has been pending for long, that women should also be given reservations. Okay, voters list, it is the electoral roll which is prepared much before the elections, and that the names of all the eligible voters are written, right? It is very important to get it rectified from time to time, so that eligible voters don't run out of this electoral system. Okay, it does lest it happens that people are not able to vote because of faulty voters list. So there are in every election we get to hear about these kind of reports, wherein some people are always not able to vote because of the faulty or unrevised voters list. Model code of conduct is something which is imposed by the election commission, right? And it happens from the date of the announcement of the election dates. So under this, no party or candidate can use any place of worship for election propaganda, means for their spread of lies to win elections. They might even use religion, so that cannot be allowed. Use government vehicles, aircrafts and officials for elections. Once elections are announced, Ministers shall not lay foundation stones of any projects, take any big policy decisions, or make any promises of providing public facilities. Right? They cannot give them any promise of offering money or providing any public facility since the start of the or since the imposition of model code of conduct. Right? We have to also understand one thing very clearly over here, that during the election time, it is the election commission under which the government officers have to work. Right? That we will discuss more in detail little later. Right? We can see here this picture depicts the booth rigging, and even we would say that booth capturing is happening, wherein voters are told that their votes have been cast. They may go home happily. What makes election in India democratic? Now we have a system or many such features setups which clearly indicate that we have in our country the elections in a truly democratic manner. First reason is we have Independent Election Commission. Independent Election Commission is like the judiciary, which is independent in the country. The Election Commission is also a very powerful body and independent as well. So government cannot interfere with the work of Election Commission. Clear? So the point is very clear, and the Election Commission enjoys the same kind of independence as I just now spoke that the judiciary enjoys. The Chief Election Commissioner is appointed by the President of India, but once appointed, the Chief Election Commissioner is not answerable to the President or the government. Even if the ruling party or the government does not like what the Commission does, it is virtually impossible for it to remove the CEC, Chief Election Commissioner. And there are immense powers and rights of Election Commission. See, Election Commission takes decisions on every aspect of conduct and control of elections, from the announcement of elections to the declaration of results. It implements the code of conduct and punishes any candidate or party that violates it. During the election period, the EC can order the government to follow some guidelines to prevent use and misuse of governmental powers to enhance its chance to win elections or to transfer some government officials. When on election duty, government officers work under the control of EC and not the government. Now, second important indicator of why in our country elections are democratic is the popular participation. In our country, large number of people, especially the poor and the disadvantaged ones, vote in large numbers, and always the voting percentage has been rising, and there has been a growing awareness among the middle class and upper middle class people or richer people also to vote, to participate in the electoral competition. So high percentage of voters always indicates that they believe in democratic system, and they believe in they also believe in the fact that elections in our country are very, very reliable. So they vote in large number of people. They vote in large number of people vote. They come out of their homes and they cast their votes. Acceptance of election outcome. So there is a great amount of sportsmanship shown. The losing party accepts the defeat as people's mandate, and the winning party also humbly shows the victory, doesn't show its arrogance, or there is no we can expect the political parties, just like in a game of cricket, what happens, the winning team is congratulated by the losing team, right, without having any kind of bitter feelings. So there is a greater amount of sportsmanship in our country, because the election outcomes are accepted with greater degree of belief, greater degree of reliance over the electoral system. Okay. Challenges to free and fair elections. Candidates and parties with lot of money may not be sure of their victory, but they do enjoy a big and unfair advantage over smaller parties and independents. We can see always there is a clear-cut difference between the richer parties and the smaller parties. The richer parties are able to carry out their election campaign in a more, though there is a certain amount fixed for spending during the election, but even after that we can see lot of tricks, lot of ways are employed by the political parties to win the elections. And for a richer political party, or for a more more powerful political party, it becomes more convenient to manage elections, or to to show their presence in front of people more through electronic media, print media. So we can see that there is a greater advantage to richer and powerful parties over the smaller political parties and independent people. Electoral challenges, we can see candidates with criminal connection have been able to push others out of the electoral race and secure a ticket from the major parties. Often we have seen people with some criminal background, they get success in getting the tickets from the major political parties. Some families also tend to dominate political parties. Okay, and we also see very often elections offer very little choice to ordinary citizens. So there is no real choice, no meaningful choice left to the people when they see all the leaders are equally more or less having one or the other kind of allegations over one another, and they find that there is no meaningful choice left to them. And next is smaller parties and independent candidates suffer a huge disadvantage. This we have just spoken of. So we often find the smaller party candidates or independent candidates suffer a huge disadvantage, right? So the chapter is ending with lot of pictures here. We can see how during the election time the voter is so powerful, voter is bigger, and after the election results are out, the voter is forgotten and leaders are having their way. Okay, we can see money and muscle power. Those with more money, as we've seen, can influence the results of election, and they may take, though they may not be winning all the time, but still they might influence the election outcome at several occasions that have been seen. Okay, before we wind up, let me also discuss few of the points like we've been talking about. See, as far as the outcome of India's election is there, as I said, that our election system is more democratic. The reason being, the ruling parties often lose elections in India, both at the national and state level, right? Candidates who are known to have spent a lot of money on buying votes and those with known criminal connections often lose elections. Barring or accepting few disputed elections, the electoral outcomes are usually accepted as people's verdict by the defeated party. So, on a large scale, we can say that in our country, election process is very transparent, democratic, and reliable. Thank you so much.